Millions of people saw this photo. Most of them saw 7 men standing together, a group shot, a comeback photo, something to post, save, share. And then a small number of fans started looking more carefully, not at the whole image, at specific corners of it, at the space between people, at where hands were placed and where eyes were pointed, and what each person's body was doing relative to the people around them. And what they found, buried in a photograph that had already been seen by millions, changed the entire conversation around what BTS looks like now versus what they looked like before. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not manufactured drama. This is pattern recognition from people who have been studying these 7 human beings for over a decade. And once you see what they found, you will not be able to look at the photo the same way again. This channel is for the fans who look twice, not the ones who scroll past, the ones who stop, the ones who zoom in, the ones who pull up a photo from 2018 to compare it with a photo from 2026 because something in the new one felt different and they could not let it go until they figured out why. If that describes you, the last section of this video is going to give you something to think about for a long time. The photo dropped in the first week of June 2026. It arrived the way most official BTS content arrives, with no announcement that it was coming, posted to their official channels simultaneously, immediately flooded by millions of reactions within the first hour. A group photograph, all 7 members, together in a frame for the first time in that specific formal way that the industry calls a family photo, the kind that signals something official, something curated, something meant to be remembered. The timing was not accidental. The photo came out less than 2 weeks before the Busan homecoming concerts, June 12 and 13, which are themselves the most symbolically loaded shows in the entire Arirang World Tour. The group's debut anniversary, the city where 2 of its members were born, the same stadium where they last performed together before 3 years of mandatory military service scattered them across different bases and different lives. A group photo released at that moment carries weight that goes beyond the frame. It is a statement about who they are right now, not who they were at debut, not who they became during the Permission to Dance era, not the version of them that existed before everything paused. Who they are in June 2026, after everything. And ARMY, the fans who look twice, started examining that statement very carefully. The first detail that people started flagging was the positioning. In group photos from earlier eras in BTS, particularly from 2018 through 2021, when the group was at the peak of their pre-hiatus commercial momentum, there was a visible formality to how the members arranged themselves. The compositions were tight and intentional in a way that read as carefully managed, everyone exactly where the visual logic of the image required them to be. The new photo reads differently. The arrangement is still clearly deliberate. This is a professional photo shoot, not a candid. But there is something in the spacing and the physicality that feels less managed, like the people in the frame have been somewhere together, have lived through something together, and the residue of that shared experience is visible in how naturally their bodies occupy the same space. Several fans noticed this simultaneously and independently, which is when the observations started gaining traction. The posts were not coordinated. They came from different fan accounts in different countries, and they all landed on a version of the same observation. Something about this photo feels different from before. Not worse, not better, just different in a way that is hard to name, but very easy to feel. That is when the more systematic analysis began. The detail that generated the longest threads was not something most casual viewers would notice in their first pass through the image. It was Jimin's position relative to the people on either side of him. In group photos from earlier BTS era, Jimin occupied a very specific kind of space in the frame. Not always the same physical position, sometimes left, sometimes center, sometimes right, depending on the composition, but always with a particular quality of containment. A subtle impression that he was aware, in some calibrated way, of precisely how much space he was permitted to take up. Fans who have been studying his body language for years have a specific vocabulary for this. They describe it in terms of shoulder tension, in terms of the angle of his chin, in terms of whether his weight is settled or slightly forward. It is the language of someone who is always measuring the distance between himself and the people around him, not out of discomfort, but out of a kind of habitual precision about self-presentation. In the new photo, that calibration is not visible. His weight is settled. His shoulders are where they are without the micro-adjustment that used to be there. And the space between him and the members on either side of him, the specific quality of that proximity, reads as occupied rather than maintained, like someone who has stopped calculating the exact distance and is simply standing where it feels right. Fans who noticed this started doing something that ARMY does very well. They pulled up comparison images, side by side, same formation, different year. And the difference, once you see it in that context, becomes impossible to attribute to lighting or camera angle. Something about how Jimin exists in physical space alongside these 6 other people has shifted, and the new family photo is the most visible documentation of that shift that has ever existed in a single frame. The reaction from the wider ARMY community when this analysis started circulating was varied in the way ARMY reactions always are, when something requires interpretation rather than just celebration. Some fans were immediately convinced. They saw it instantly, the moment the comparison images were placed side by side. Some were skeptical, arguing that reading this much into a photo shoot was going further than the evidence supported. Some were somewhere in the middle, not sure about the specific body language reading, but certain that something in the photo felt different even if they could not articulate what. What nobody disputed was the photo itself. What nobody argued against was the basic observation that this image does not look like the group photographs from before, that something in the texture of how these 7 people relate to each other in shared space has changed. The debate was about what that change means, not whether it exists. And that distinction between arguing about something is real and arguing about what it means is actually quite important, because a lot of the most significant moments in BTS's history have been contested in exactly the same way. The moment is undeniable. The interpretation is what generates thousands of comment threads.
Here is where the analysis started going somewhere more interesting than just body language. Fans who dug into the specific positioning of the photograph began connecting it to something that had been discussed in various forms across different platforms for months. The question of how 3 years of separation, individual military service, individual solo projects, individual lives, had changed the internal architecture of the group. This is not a question that BTS has ever answered directly. It is too personal and too complicated for a press release or an interview answer. But it is a question that the people who watch them closely have been sitting with since the comeback began. And the theory that started gaining the most traction after the photo analysis, the one that had the most evidence attached to it, the one that felt the most grounded in observable fact rather than speculation, was this: the separation made them choose each other. Not in the dramatic sense, not in the sense of a crisis that forced the decision, but in the quieter, more durable sense of people who had the time and the distance to understand what the presence of the other 6 people in their lives actually meant, who came back from 3 years of being apart and stood in the same room together and felt something that they could not have felt if they had never been separated at all. And that something, whatever it is visible in the photograph, in the way they stand near each other, in the specific quality of proximity that registers differently now than it did in 2021. There is one more detail in the photograph that almost nobody picked up on in the initial wave of analysis. It came from a fan account that had been tracking something specific across every official BTS visual release since the comeback began: the eyes. In group photographs, where people are looking matters enormously. The most technically perfect group composition will read as cold if the subject's attention is distributed in a way that creates emotional distance. Conversely, a group shot where the subject's attention is oriented towards each other, even slightly, even as a secondary direction rather than the primary, reads as alive in a way that pure technical execution cannot manufacture. In the new family photo, something specific happens with the distribution of visual attention that this fan account had been tracking across multiple releases. The members who are positioned toward the edges of the frame are not purely oriented to the camera. There is a fractional orientation, barely perceptible, easily attributable to natural head positioning, towards the center of the group. Jimin is in a position that this particular account flagged separately. His orientation toward the camera is clear and deliberate. This is a photo shoot, not a candid, and he is doing what the photo shoot requires. But there is something in the direction of his attention that does not resolve entirely into the lens, something that is slightly distributed, not toward any specific member, just toward the group itself, toward the collective space that they all occupy together. The fan account's caption was brief. He's looking at the camera, but he's also looking at home. That sentence generated thousands of shares in the 12 hours after it was posted, not because it is definitive, not because it proves anything, but because it named something that a lot of people felt when they looked at the photo and could not articulate. Here is what this all adds up to, and this is the part that I think matters most. BTS has existed for 13 years. In those 13 years, they have released hundreds of official photographs, group shots, concept images, promotional materials, documentary stills, behind-the-scenes captures, an enormous visual archive of 7 people being documented together across a span of time that most groups in this industry do not survive. The fans who have been watching that entire archive understand something about what progression looks like in a visual record of a group. They can track changes in how the members inhabit shared space across years. They can identify the moments where something shifted, a relationship deepened, a dynamic changed, a confidence settled into someone that was not there before. What the new family photo represents, according to the analysis that is accumulated around it, is one of the most significant moments in that visual record. Not because of what the members are wearing or how the lighting was designed or where they were photographed, because of what is visible in how they stand together, in how they orient toward each other in a space they're sharing, in the specific quality of presence that 13 years of choosing the same group of people produces when it finally gets to exhale after 3 years of being held apart. The hidden detail that ARMY noticed is not a secret message. It's not an Easter egg placed intentionally for fans to decode. It is something more ordinary and more meaningful than either of those things. It is 7 people who have known each other for 13 years, standing together after 3 years apart and looking in the particular way that 13 years of history can produce, like they know exactly where they are and exactly who they're standing next to. And one of those people is Jimin, standing in the frame the way someone stands when they have stopped calculating and started simply existing, oriented toward the camera, and somehow, at the same time, oriented toward the 6 people around him. Home. So here is what I want to leave you with. The question whether ARMY is reading too much into a photograph is one that every fan community faces whenever analysis goes deeper than surface observation. There is always a version of this conversation where the conclusion is, it's just a photo, people are projecting. But I think the more honest question is not whether the reading is too deep, it is whether the reading is accurate, whether what people are seeing in the distribution of space and attention and physical ease is actually there, visible to anyone who looks carefully enough, regardless of whether it was placed there intentionally. My own read is that it is there, that the photograph documents something real about where these 7 people are with each other right now, and that Jimin's specific position in it, the settled quality, the distributed attention, the absence of the calibration that used to be present, is one of the most quietly significant visual documents of his entire career. What do you see when you look at it? If you notice something in the photo that this video did not cover, a detail, a positioning, a quality of attention that I missed, write it in the comments. This specific kind of analysis is always sharpest when it comes from multiple people looking at the same image from different angles.